Hey there! You tried to use camera triggers and they just felt terrible. Shaky, disorienting, or most commonly just off? This one's for you. Let's get you equipped with the knowledge you need to fix that. You see, when 2.2 dropped, everyone went nuts with camera effects for a little bit. But the levels that actually got rated, they mellowed out. A little sway, a little zoom, placed intentionally. And that's exactly what we'll be looking at today. Where do camera triggers belong, where they don't, and how to use them to make your level feel alive without making your player feel sick. Ready? Let's go in. Rotation on impact is one of the most satisfying camera tricks out there. The way it works is that upon a donk or some other sound that is kind of like on the front in the music, will rotate the screen slightly, as if the level itself got hit. Let's take a look at an example. This is going to be most common in flowy and energetic levels, but I do see how you could still use this in a level that's a little bit more muted, if it has such an accent that makes sense to use this effect with. Okay, so we're here in the copy of Demolition, and let's take a look at how exactly those triggers are set up that make this feel so awesome. So those are here on the very top. There is quite a bunch of triggers, as you can see. This is a very energetic level. Let's take a look here. So those, as you can see, those dinks are made up of pairs of a zoom and a rotate trigger. So let's first take a look at the zoom trigger. So as you can see, this zooms out towards 0.830, and that takes only a tenth of a second, easing out. And then the other zoom is going to go back to the other value, and we can see the difference between those values is 0.04. So that's going to be more or less how much you want to zoom out, zoom in, no matter what your original zoom was, because I do believe that there is a little bit of a zoom out for this part, so that's why those values are low here. But if you were to go from just 1, then here I believe you would go with 1.04, and then for this one you'd go back to 1. And this takes a second. And this one only takes a tenth of a second. Okay. And with that, let's take a look at those rotates. So it only rotates for 3 degrees. That's not a lot of degrees. And the move times are going to be the exact same. Easing is easing out. And this takes two blocks, 2 frames. Those are not frames. 2 blocks, as you can see, there is 1 block full in between those. And you can tweak this a little bit towards anything you like, but those are the good values that don't feel obnoxious and also work and make the effect pop. The next effect we have on the list today is a slow swaying rotation. So what happens to your screen is it rotates a little bit to the right, and then it goes back towards the middle, and then it goes a little bit to the left, and then goes back. And this one is pretty subtle, or at least it should be pretty subtle, but it can be used in both the energetic and the chill levels. It's best on sections that are supposed to either feel floaty or are supposed to be a build-up towards something. That's when that feeling of floatiness and that sway is going to feel the best. Let's take a look at an example. Let's take a look at the triggers that make this effect up. So again, we're working with rotate triggers, and let's take a look at some of their properties. The first thing that's important to, I guess, emphasize here is that the effect starts 2 units before the actual portal that begins this section this effect is dedicated towards. So it starts a little bit earlier than the actual section, but not a whole lot, 2 units isn't a lot, but wanted to mention that. Now let's look at its properties. So we're rotating again 3 degrees, which seems to be a sweet spot for many effects. we're doing that over the course of 2 seconds, and we're using the sign in out easing. That's going to be used again here, except we're just undoing the 3 degrees of that rotation, again over the course of 2 seconds, and then going further, we just repeat this process. Now, if I were you, I would actually make this a spawn loop that you can start and then stop at some point, but again, up to you 100%. This is a fun one. Honestly, I applaud whoever came up with this, it's super creative. Good job, man. The way this works is your screen will get slightly offset rotated during a transition, and then on an accent in the music, it'll get swiftly corrected back to normal. Let's take a look at an example. The effect facilitates that feeling of instability, yet in a far more rigid way. I actually imagine there are levels where the sways we've talked about before wouldn't work at all, and this would actually fit in just about perfect. So let's take a look again at how this is actually made in the level. So this is the section, this is where the effect begins, and so naturally we find this rotate trigger here on the top. So let's take a look how it does its thing. So we'll see that it rotates by 2 degrees, and I think this is actually the sweet spot that we'll find in most of those levels, based on what I'm seeing. That those values will just oscillate between, 3 degrees to 2 degrees. I haven't seen 1 degree yet, I think that might be a little bit too little. But 3 and 2 seem to just be sweet spots that many people settle for, so you definitely want to follow that, because they make the screen noticeably rotated, but they aren't over the top. And then for the move time, as we can see this time, it's actually an instant effect, which I was surprised to learn about. I thought it would be something that happens over the course of like 0.25 move time, but that's what it is. And feel free to go ahead with that as well, or to try out, doing this swiftly but not instantaneously. I feel like both would actually work pretty well. And then this is where the screen corrects itself. And we can see this has some move time, but again, it's pretty fast. So this just corrects it back to 0 degrees, obviously. And then it's using exponential out for the easing, and it just takes 0.2, which is very fine and actually pretty normal. There are sections where energy just needs to be flowing constantly, and a pulse just isn't going to cut it. What you are looking for, if that's your case, is a zoom pulse. So essentially what we're doing is we're instantly switching up the zoom value to something, let's say, more far away, punched out, and then bringing it very swiftly, right away, back onto the previous value. Let's take a look. Okay, so we're back here in the editor, and let's again take a look at how to punch that screen out. This effect is pretty simple, just like most of the other ones. This is no exception, just a couple zoom triggers. So let's take a look at what they're doing here. I'll just maybe... okay, there we go. So the first zoom is here, and then the other zoom that undoes the effect, quote-unquote, is just 1 cube away from that. Okay, so for this one, what we're doing is we're going back to the zoom of 1, 0. Now, the important part to remember is that for this section, the default value for a zoom is 1.05, and so this is going back into 1.0. Clear is actually punching the screen inwards a little bit. This happens next to instantly, as we can see here. Like, if you say 0.05, you could as well just be saying 0.0, if I'm honest. But we'll see that the line, like, it exists here, but it's not even exiting our trigger barely at all. It's going like half a block farther than that. And then once we have this, the other zoom is going to take 0.30, so again, next to no time at all, to go back to the default value for this section, which is 1.05. And then the easing is just none on both of those. What we can do is realize that the camera's center is usually to the right of our player. This gives us ample time to read what's ahead and introduces the usual gameplay flow. Now, if we move that camera's center onto the cube's position, or even slightly before it, so both of those are to the left, we give our players less time to see what's in front of them, introducing quite literally panic into the equation. It is a fun effect for a short period of time in the right moment. It mixes things up, it feels different, and it really makes you shake, if that makes sense. But it does make sight reading harder, so if that's not your intention, you shouldn't use it. Let's take a look-see. We're here back in the level. Let's take a look at how we can achieve this effect. So the first quick thing to understand about this part in specific is that as the player hits this little orb, we enter this little transition period, and that is where our effect is smoothly kicking in. And then once we are on the actual spider gameplay, this effect is fully applied by that point. So you can follow this or you can do something else, but it is one thing to note. Then, the triggers that we've got here, the first one is static, so this just exits some previous static that was here, so this isn't important to us at all. And then the meat of this effect is the offset trigger. So the offset trigger allows you to change where the camera is looking in relation to the player. And so if we move it on the x-axis, on the horizontal axis, if we move it towards the left, then what's going to happen is, on our screen, the player is going to be more towards the right, because the camera is kind of like in relation to the player in such a way. And so we're doing that, we're moving the camera 3 units towards the left over the course of 0.6 of a second, and then we ease out that. And as you can see, this effect ends right after we actually enter the spider portal. Most of it is happening during this transition, and then once this is happening for a couple seconds, we just undo this, going back to offset x0, offset y0, and again even out over the course of 0.6 of a second. Here we make the camera exactly track the player's movement. This is very bouncy. It introduces a lot of panic to the player's movements, and it is exactly because of those traits that it becomes annoying fast. This one is powerful for when the music demands energy, but don't keep it on for longer than roughly 5 to 10 seconds, or your player will literally want to throw their phone/PC out the window. This is the effect. And the fun fact here I actually have for you is that this is by far the easiest camera follow to code into just about any game. And yet, next to no game has it as the default, even in spite of that fact. Proceed with caution or else you'll get... Was that too much? I think it depends on who you ask, but for me it for sure was. So let's look at how we can implement this effect. The first thing that we have to set up in order to make this happen is this little dot that you'll see here. This little dot is affected by this move trigger. This move trigger makes it so that that little dot is exactly following the player for the next 4 seconds or so. And the important part to also get about what's going on with this dot is that it's going to be where the player is at the moment of this move starting, right? And the other important part is that the player controls are actually disabled while in this section of the level, so this is 100% reliable that you're going to be here while this dot starts following you exactly. And then once we have this dot, I'll just remind you it's on group 95. What we can do, once we get to where we want to start our actual camera effect, is we can cancel the previous one, don't need to see this, and then we can start up an exact follow of target group ID 95, which is this invisible dot. No duration, so it's just an instant snap towards that, no easing, so you get this really rigid feeling effect. And we have to make sure we check follow, otherwise it's just going to snap onto the dot's position for that instant and just stay there. So you want to make sure it follows the player and the dot and the player. And once we have that in place, this creator has decided to ease this effect out a little bit using a few offsets to both of the axes. You can see them right here, and they make it so that the effect isn't as tough to look at, although it is still tough to look at. So yeah, I've already talked about this, you got it. And that's that for the effects that I have prepared for you today. Hopefully that was useful, hopefully you have earned some inspirations. If this brought value to you and helped you save some time, please consider also helping me get something out of that by tapping the like button or by clicking the subscribe button if you are feeling fancy a little bit. And other than that, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!